Good morning. Well, she's out there lubed up and ready. The old power washer's gassed up and ready to go. So let's get her done. I have my piston set up here in the jig. I got to heat up the small end here and press that pin in place. If you're so inclined, up there at the top of this window is a video that I made a few years ago describing this fixture and what it does, and also in the description there's a link, an Amazon affiliate link, to a tool that you can buy that does essentially the same thing. In fact, it looks very similar, for around $100 if you need to press wrist pins onto connecting rod. And for what it's worth, every time you watch one of my videos, check the description. If you see something in the video you like, and you may be inclined to purchase said item, there's a whole host of Amazon affiliate links down in the description, linking to several different products, and that's one way that you can financially support this channel. It doesn't cost you any extra. I just get a little bit of a kickback off that stuff, and I turn that revenue right back into the channel to create content for y'all. If you don't see anything you like in the description, that's fine. You can still help. You're probably going to buy stuff anyway. Just go to one of those links, look at it, say, oh, that's nice, I have no interest, and then go and look for your own stuff. Maybe you're going to get, I don't know, a popcorn maker, or a cat brush. I don't know. Go through that link and then go look at your stuff, purchase whatever you want, and whatever you purchase I still get a kickback on, and that helps me out immensely, and believe me when I tell you, I need all the help I can get. Carry on.
20 minutes later.
It's on. Okay, what next? I gotta let this thing cool down because it's still pretty hot. Got the block out here baking in the sun, drying out. So I'll get that back in here, start cleaning up the residue off the bearing surfaces, and start installing bearings, get the crank in. Then once the crank's in and the cam's in, then I can start putting pistons in. See if I can't get this bottom end put together today. So that you've seen how I put the piston back on the connecting rod, I bet you might be wondering how I got the connecting rod off the old piston. Well, you might be guessing with that there press over there, and you'd be wrong. So in the description there's another commercially available tool that is very much like the tool that I made with stuff that I already had. If you don't want to use that stuff for making a pin extractor and you just want to buy one, there's a link down in the description to an affiliate link to purchase one of those. They're about 50 bucks. This is what that tool looks like, by the way, and what I have here is the tool that I made, and it's nothing more than a piece of all thread with a nut welded on one end and a nut that's screwed on the other end, and an 1/8" deep well impact socket. Let me show you how I use this. So you have to use a little bit of imagination and imagine that there's a connecting rod attached to the piston pin here. But rather than using a press and setting this on the bed of the press and pressing the pin through, using the bottom of the piston as an anvil, if you will, and what probably would happen is that this part of the piston would break and it would get all kind of messed up, and the potential to screwing up the connecting rod would be exponentially higher. So this is how this little puller is going to work. This socket is bigger in diameter than the connecting rod pin, right? The rod pin is press fit into the rod. It free floats on the piston. So I take the socket and I set it on the skirt. Put the socket through the center of the pin. The nut is smaller in diameter than the pin, and I put my impact on this side, drive that all thread, and tighten it all thread down, and it just pulls that pin right out, right through the connecting rod. If I had a spare piston laying around, I would show you how it worked, but it worked really good actually. So about 10 inches of 1/2 inch all thread with a nut welded on one end and a nut just screwed onto the other end, and an 1/8" 1/2 inch drive deep well socket. And there's your piston rod pin puller. You're welcome. Alright, just getting ready to put in the main bearings, and I'm unpackaging the bearings, and I thought that this might be of interest to anybody who's never done this before. If you've done this before, then this is going to be old hat, and just bear with us. But if you notice, this is a set of bearing halves that have a smooth surface, right? There's no groove in them. The rest of the bearings have a groove in them and a hole. That's the oiling groove. That hole needs to line up with that hole in the block, and that little tang right there has got to fit into that notch. That's pretty self-explanatory, but I'm sure somebody has screwed that up before. You put that on, and then the oil will come through that hole, and that's what oils the big end of the rod. On this particular engine, the third cap is the thrust bearing. That's the thrust bearing. That has a little ears on the side, and that keeps the crank from wandering back and forth. So just know that that oil groove and the hole's got to line up with the oil galley hole, not the other way around. If you do it the other way around, you're going to seize the engine shortly after startup. That's no good. One thing to consider when you're putting these things in, if the bearing isn't fitting all the way in, meaning it's not flush on both ends, and you can't get it flush on both ends, like no matter how you try, you get one flush and one sticking proud, take the bearing off. There's probably some foreign material on the back of it. And if you don't take it off, you're gonna create a hot spot on that bearing. Whatever piece of gunk is behind that bearing material is going to apply just enough pressure to create wear on that bearing. If it's excessive enough, you'll actually, you know, as it heats up, it'll close the gap and close up that oil gap that you need for everything to run smoothly, and it'll spin the bearing, and then you'll have to do it all over again. I was just about ready to lay the crank in, and I remembered that I don't have my rear main seal yet, so I run down to the parts store and pick that stuff up. It should be here momentarily, and I'll put my rear main seal in and bolt the caps down, torque them down, and then take them back off, wipe the assembly lube off, and then I got to get some plastic gauge and check the oil clearances to make sure that everything is within spec. Pretty certain it is. It had good oil pressure before, but I want to check it nonetheless. And if you've never heard of plastic gauge, give me a second and I'll show you what that's all about. A little bit of oil in the cylinder, move up the cylinder walls. Make sure the mark on the piston is pointed to the front of the engine. I put these rubber hoses on here to protect the cylinder wall from getting scratched. I put the rod journal on the crankshaft straight up and lower this in place. Got my spring compressor on, the rings pressed. Tap it in. Just snugging stuff up right now. I'm not torquing anything. So that's how you set the pistons into the block. 3 down, 3 to go. All of the pistons are in, and all these bolts are just snugged down. I haven't torqued them yet. I'm gonna go online and get the torque specs. I found a really good source for all the specifications for this engine, and that's all the further I'm going to go tonight. I just shut the air conditioning off. It's 105 degrees outside and about 100 in here. It's probably not 100, it's probably 90. Still, it's hot. It would be hotter if I didn't have that air conditioning. So I'm going to call it a night. I'm going to go take a shower and I'm going to go take a nap because I'm tired, and I'll probably pick this up somewhere around 5-ish tomorrow morning. Okay? Alright, see you in the morning.